Started. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Nadia. I work at Cherry Ventures. We invest pre-seed to Series A. I predominantly invest in AI companies. And I'm super happy to be here with my fellow panelists today. And I would say let's get it started with a very brief round of introductions, going from left to right. Rodolfo, you're up first.
Hello. My name is Rodolfo. I'm CEO and co-founder of Ver Computing, building reversible computing chips for AI, based in the UK and on the West Coast.
My name's Don Barnettson. I'm SVP of products at Credo. We're a communications company focused on back-end networks in the AI data center.
Piotr Tomasik, co-founder, president, TensorWave. We're the AMD Neo Cloud at scale. 10,000, tens of thousands of GPUs now, hundreds of thousands next year. If you have memory-intensive workloads, you should come see us. We can probably blow Big Green out of the water.
My name is Hakim Lumi. I'm the product manager at Oracle. I'm covering all the different solutions, DB security solutions around AI, data, and training, and so on.
I'm Matt Zieler. I'm the founder and CEO of Clarify, where we're an AI platform that sits across all clouds and on-premise, so you can orchestrate your AI workloads everywhere the same way.
Thank you so much. Let's dive right in. So maybe a first question for you, Don and Peter. What does sovereign AI mean to you? Is it about infrastructure, values, control, or something else?
Sure, I think it has to start with infrastructure, because if you don't have control over the infrastructure, there's very little else you can do. But that's obviously not the objective. That's just a tool to the objective. And so the objective is to have models that have the values and laws of the society that they're representing. I think the challenge is ensuring that there's a sufficient investment in order to support the scale of that, so that you don't end up with these stranded investments in very small clusters that won't allow you to get to the end goal that the rule's trying to get to.
Yeah, I think double-clicking on the infrastructure layer, power and space, I think, are the most important items for sovereignty in AI. If you don't have those two things, you can't have any of the other parts of the stack living within your country or organization.
We can do, okay. So in my mind, obviously we have a regulation part. So to be sovereign, we have to respect the regulation all around the world, especially in Europe, for example. If you want to be sovereign, you have to make sure that your infrastructure is located at the right place, in the right country. Obviously, you have to make sure that all the people who will manage these different environment will be also under your control. So it means sovereignty, you have to control end-to-end everything, from infrastructure to the decision. So that's why it's so important to make sure you have 100% of the infrastructure, process, people under your control.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with the rest of the panelists. Infrastructure comes first, but I think a lot of places need to be thinking about the software that's coming next. If they don't have the right software, you're not going to utilize that and utilize it efficiently. And so we're working with a lot of different organizations on doing that now to set them up for future success.
On the software layer, or generally looking at the whole stack, do you think that in total can be sovereign, or would you say there's realistically always going to be parts that are global dependencies?
Yeah, I think there's going to be global dependencies for sure. I think parts that could be sovereign or the data that's going to encode those values, the resulting model could be, but the algorithms that power the model are very likely going to be coming from open source or collaborations beyond kind of borders. And that's going to lead to the best innovations. I think talent is another one that's hit or miss. You ideally can attract talent to work on these problems and stay local, but it's a global talent war right now in AI, so it's going to be a tough challenge.
I think a question for the founders when it comes to talent. Would you say it makes sense for you right now to care about sovereign AI, or do you think it is almost just go for what's cheapest, what's best, what's most available?
So I look at this conference, and I was around during the dot-com crash. So I think a lot of these businesses, like half of them, will completely disappear over the next couple of years. And truly the one differentiator is going to be talent, right? I think talent is probably the most important thing, and talent is not equally distributed. So I would say, like, we talk about sovereign and everything, right? But really, it's all about talent. And do you have policies that can attract the best talent on the planet or not? And like, clearly, the European Union is not like the best player here, right? So, I'm not sure if that was your question, but.
I mean, I'll talk about what founders should be thinking about, in my opinion, is pragmatism and not narratives about whether something's sovereign or not. As long as they're following the law, you should look what enables your company to move the fastest and be able to enable your workloads for your customers.
Do you have a concrete example? What has helped you move faster?
Yeah, I mean, in our world, we have to find space and power as quickly as possible, and find partners that can move as fast as us. If we added to that, a requirement that it had to be, I don't know, we're based in Las Vegas. If we added a requirement for it to be in Las Vegas, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are right now. That's an example, a concrete example of moving fast. So.
Yeah, that's interesting because, again, in terms of sovereignty, why we want to be sovereign? In general, you don't want to be influenced by someone else. You want to make sure everything you will do, you will take the decision with the right element, at the right moment, with the right people. Again, it's just a game of power. So sovereignty doesn't mean only a technical aspect. So it means, for example, for the LLM, if you are using, you can be sovereign if you download locally an LLM, GPT or Gemini, Mistral, DeepSeek, if you want. But it doesn't mean you are sovereign, because you don't know what is this LLM. If this is a black box, and you don't know how it has been trained, with what kind of data sources they are used, in which interest, maybe they will control the decision at the end, and maybe they will manipulate your decision. Because at the end, you are accountable of your decision. But if you based everything, thinking, prospective, or whatever your predictive information on your LLM, and you are not the creator of this LLM, maybe you can be manipulated, even if you stored it locally in Europe, in France, within a data center in France, managed by French people, and so on. So sovereignty is much more than just a technical aspect, and that's why we have to take care about that.
Okay, going a bit deeper there, does that mean, looking at the global AI race, it even makes sense to look at sovereignty and sovereign AI, or do you think it might be a disadvantage and just make us a bit slower?
Again, for me, if you don't control all the process, again, from end to end, from data sources that you collect, that you select, to the decision, you are not sovereign. It's impossible. You can, for example, you can buy a car, or you can hire an employee. I think this is a good example. You can hire a very, very smart and very good employee. You think he will work for you, but every decision he will tell you, he will provide you, is influenced by another company, by someone. Maybe it could be your competitor, or maybe your enemy. This is exactly what we are living today with the LLM. Because the LLM, especially in Europe, are not trained by European guy. They are not understand by the European or the French guy, and so on. We are using different LLMs. We don't know how they did that. We trust them, but sorry, a French is not a Chinese, is not even a Californian. We have taboos, contradictions, biases. We have a lot of things, and when you train your LLM, This is a context, a cultural context that you put in your LLM. And you influence, if I'm asking something on ChatGPT, for example, I'm pretty sure I will have a very good answer. But it doesn't mean this is my culture, my tradition. What about a cat or a dog? It's very easy to compare a picture of a cat. But if I'm talking about religion, the place of the woman, the political aspect, here is very cultural, very, even an Italian is different, compare me, in France. So that's why if you don't control everything, if you are not able to train your own LLM with your own data, with your own process, and so on and so on and so on, again, sovereignty, it's only a word.
Yeah, so when you talk about like the race, right? I think there is a race, but the race is between the US and China, and that's it. Like everyone else doesn't matter, or they are an appendage of the US and China. And that's sort of like the fundamental misunderstanding at the European level or even global level, right? There is only the US and US capital markets that are funding part of it. And I mean, look at the chairs, right? They couldn't find a single German, Italian, Spanish company, right? Oh, sorry, yes. And instead, the Chinese sponsored the chairs, right? I think, look, all these people talk about it, right? But it's really like there is no race. Europe already lost this race. Like, I don't think it's controversial.
I think the scale of infrastructure and spending that's necessary in order to be competitive here is really daunting. And maybe on an individual country level, it might not be possible, but certainly on a collective European level, it's possible. What we've seen with the large US hyperscalers is the challenges of moving from the what I would describe as the relatively bespoke clouds that many of the folks here are building today, 5 or 10,000 GPUs into 100,000 or a million GPU cluster are very, very large. And if you don't make good decisions along the way, you end up with stranded assets that you'll get terrible utilization on and just won't be functional downstream. And unfortunately, policymakers are, they love to sign agreements and make decisions to spend hundreds of billions of euros on things, but they don't necessarily like to stick around for the hard work of making this asset useful over time. And so I think there's a lot of training that we can bring from what we've done with the US hyperscalers to help folks here make good decisions, to deploy networks in a useful way so that these clusters are ultimately functional and delivering the value that the taxpayers are going to have to subsidize them towards.
Can we talk a bit more about the stranded assets you just mentioned? Because, of course, in Europe, if we try, at what point do we maybe realize it's a stranded asset, and then what are potential de-risking strategies that we can make use of?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult today. You have these assets, these GPUs that are typically depreciated over 5 years, but every year you're getting almost doubling of performance. And so how do you straight line depreciate that? Maybe that's a good question for Peter over time. But what we see in the US is folks are designing training clusters initially, and then after 2 years, they're not competitive as training clusters anymore, and they become inference clusters. And so they're building out, the Hopper clusters today are starting to be repurposed as inference clusters as the Blackwell clusters come online. I suspect something similar in the AMD ecosystem is happening.
I mean, double-clicking on that, that's exactly how we're modeling it. If you do have a training cluster that's put up today, it'll, be outclassed very quickly. And so you have to plan to bring all those units into a pool for on-demand inference until electricity rises too high, and then, you're going to have to go refurbish the fleet with new GPUs. It's a constant money machine. So.
I think let's bring it back to the software layer a bit. We spoke a lot about values. What does it mean to be in a country? A cat and a dog, we all understand, but then I think religion is a great example, also the way we grow up. How do you think we can use storytelling and narrative to care about sovereign AI and maybe also get people to be more conscious of what they're using?
If for the moment, what I'm observing today, if you're talking about AI to customers and to people all around the world or on the street, they will think about ChatGPT. Okay, this is a platform. I will ask everything, and that's really funny, very interesting. Maybe this is a good employee, a good sponsorship, never mind. But in reality, for the companies, they don't care about these kind of things. They just want to use the powerful of the natural language, just to discuss with the platform like I can do in the front of a human being. But in reality, they would love to interact with their ecosystem, to their own huge databases, amount of data, very, very interesting. They would love to take advantage of this powerful tool. And to do so, you have to, obviously, you have to connect everything, you have to develop and so on. But at the end, because you are using your existing data, you take the risk to expose and to disclose this sensitive information. And everybody, for the first time in the history, for the first time, everybody can have access to these kind of things. And think about the attacker. Of course, they understood that before everyone. Because if you don't know the ecosystem, the complexity of your architecture, even if you don't know SQL, Python, Perl, whatever you want, now with a single interface, like a human being, you can interact and you can extract, exfiltrate very interesting and sensitive and critical information within your company. That's where the main idea of sovereignty is important. It's not only a territory aspect, it's also within your company, within your all different departments. So the marketing maybe can have access to information, but not the developer and so on. So that's why the LLM is very interesting, but because it is memorizing, is reasoning, it can keep this kind of information. So you have to manage also who is habilitated to do that, to see that. And it's like a middleware, so you have to take care about that when you develop. So security by design, definitely. You have to make sure your data is under your control, your process is under your control. But if you just use an existing LLM, it's not enough, because you have to make sure you know how it works, why it works like that. And in that case, I'm pretty sure in the near future, once all the companies understood that, understanding that, they will create their own LLM, definitely. And they will forget maybe the open source. Maybe they will based on an existing open source one, but they will create their own LLM. Now it's too soon, too early, because they think they need to use something else. But now we can provide this kind of infrastructure to train, to infer, and so on. Maybe in 2 years, maybe less, we don't know, they will be able to create their own LLM, and now they will be really sovereign, in my point of view.
Matthew, would you say your customers at Clarify care if their AI is sovereign?
It depends on the use case, and I don't think we talked really about the use case enough. Some of the use cases you outlined, like coding agents, are general purpose in the sense that it doesn't really matter if it's sovereign or not. Like Python is a programming language, C++, JavaScript, and it's the same in every country. But there are use cases like military applications that are very specific. They have very unique knowledge. They have very different purposes depending on the different sovereignty that they're representing. And that's a perfect use case where for national security purposes, you need to kind of own the models, the data, the infrastructure, every component of that. And it helps differentiate you and protect you as a country. And we do that with the US government for many years. We were one of the first companies working on this high-profile AI project called Project Maven since 2017, way before LLMs were around. And it's been used in battlefields all over the world to help save lives. And those types of use cases are really awesome to power with sovereign AI. And I think we talked about China and US, totally agree those are the two dominating ones. But I just throw a third one in, which is the Middle East. I feel like they have the know-how of producing energy. They've done that for decades. That's accumulated a lot of capital, and now they're pivoting that towards AI. And I think that's a really strong play that will set them up probably not immediately. I don't think they're in the race today, but maybe in the next 5 years, if they build out the infrastructure they want, they could be in that race as well.
Pre the KSA, pre MBS, I would have said no chance, right? There is a line in the movie Syriana where the guy shouts, 100 years ago you were in mud huts. In 100 years from now, you will be back in mud huts, right? And super offensive, but but anyway, that was the movie. And now actually completely different, right? Right now they're the gateway to Asia, right? And to India. They don't have the infrastructure, chip embargo, but they are creating a local ecosystem, and I'm really surprised. I would have been like super bearish 5 years ago, and now I agree. UAE, Qatar, because they have the energy infrastructure and data centers. I mean, your business is being an information refinery, right? You take energy in and you spit information out, and they pay you for that. And so these guys know how to build half of the infrastructure, so the other half they can buy it.
Do you think the UAE became relevant only because they have a lot of money to spend, or also because of their storytelling?
No, money definitely talks, right? But it's not just that. It's because they know how to build energy infrastructure, right? If you go into our world in data and you plot the energy generation of China versus anyone else in the world, you'll see where they're winning. Because we have in the UK we have like bat tunnels and environmental reviews and just. I mean, Germany shut down the nuclear power station. It just simply we're losing before even the race starts, right? And these Middle Eastern countries are very rich in energy, right?
And I think the narrative that they're telling is also compelling, because it's if the government's going to put in that kind of investment, the people in that jurisdiction have to support it, and so that's where the narrative comes in more than a company's narrative. I think it's to the people and getting them behind winning in AI in the future.
I actually just came from Dubai and Riyadh before I came to Paris, so this is really timely. They are really good at storytelling, but they are actually central to most of the world population in terms of latency coming out of the Middle East. You mentioned India, China, Europe, obviously, and they're also trying to create, or at least in KSA, a data embassy where they can house other countries' data in a sovereign way, or that's their hope, right? And I'm really interested in leaning into that because the energy prices that they're quoting are something like 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's very compelling.
Also, just a side note, right? Like, I don't think people really appreciate how much, they were banning live music in cinemas, right? And within the space of a few years, now they approved GTA 5. It is literally from the Middle Ages to the modern world within the space of a decade. Right. It's insane.
Final question for you, Don. Or maybe actually for everyone on the panel here that's American, because we have a lot of Americans here, and we were saying this is actually a conference with an amazing turnout from people across the pond. Where do you think maybe America is falling short on the storytelling and narrative side of things?
I think the frontier labs in the US are extremely focused on the technical progress that they're making, and they're simply assuming that their models will dominate the world because of the technical superiority. They're ignoring the cultural aspect, and they're ignoring, maybe not everybody wants to be sort of, culturally dominated in that way. And so I think that's a real deficiency. Can they be refined so that maybe you don't have to build them from scratch in each country, which might not be economic? I think is a really interesting piece. But is there an appetite for investment to really spend that amount of resources over that extended amount of time to sort of stay current with those frontier models? I haven't seen that yet. It's really exciting to, again, to groundbreak on a brand new data center, but it's not as fun to run it for 5 years. And folks really need to have that long-term commitment to these systems.
I mean, we're definitely falling short in the same way that you described in the UK, where our power generation isn't going to keep up with what we have planned. We sort of need a new space race in the United States just for power, and it needs to come from the top, and that's not happening right now.
That's interesting. The word storytelling. We can tell all the story that we want, but at the end we have a market, we have reality, we have something very hard. And today our customers prefer to use open source solution, or a very cheap solution. And officially they will say sovereignty is so important, is essential, like security. But in reality, they don't really care. Because if it's cheap, or if it's smart enough, or if it's doing the job, they will take it. And this is maybe the very important point here. To be sovereign, you have to understand what you are doing. And if you just buy a black box, again, you don't know what you are doing. You just think you can control everything. But again, this is a game of influence. To be sovereign, you don't want to be influenced by another one. Again, it can be another company, it can be another country. And today it's very hard in an open world like we have, with internet, with a lot of things, staying sovereign, it's more than just a regulation. All the different CEO all around the planet, all around the world, they have to understand this is their own business. So they have to take care about that. So when they decide to buy this solution, or to go to this infrastructure or not, they decide to be really sovereign or not. Even if you are a very good storyteller, you can ask them everything you want. But again, at the end, what really wants the company? This is, in my mind, the essential point. So that's why they have to go to the right company who will provide them the ability to be sovereign. So to store, to use an infrastructure, control this one, train, select their own data, and so on and so on. But it means a lot of work. It means a lot of pressure. They have to accept it.
I would agree that within the US, the narrative comes from the tech companies rather than the government, and it's primarily, OpenAI and Anthropic getting a lot of the limelight. And I think there's a long tail of great companies, many on the stage here from the US, that deserve more, light, because it's not just two companies doing all the innovation, or the hyperscalers plus those two companies. It's everybody in that community. And I think what's missing compared to China is that government coalition of, we want to win AI by 2030. You mentioned the space race. It's kind of that mindset that China has for AI, and I don't think the US has that. So to fill that void, it's the tech companies trying to build that narrative, but it feels a little disjoint.
I mean, it didn't help when the politicians tried to limit the amount of parameters really early.
Yeah, and every administration, as we've seen from the last one to this one, it has like polar opposite views on things. So that just makes things oscillate.
We're almost at time, so if you could leave the audience with one piece of advice, what would it be?
Write to your policymakers, ban unions, decrease capital gain tax, make it easier to import talent. I think this will be a good start.
I'm going to start a little closer to the ground than that. The second most expensive thing you put in your data center is the network. You really need to make good choices on the plumbing you put in your data center, otherwise it's not going to work. So try to learn from what the US hyperscalers have done over the last decade and replicate that. Otherwise, it's a terribly painful process. Credo can help.
Being beholden to a single supplier is probably not a winning business. So should look into diversity of silicon.
Don't scare about this revolution. Use it, understand it, control it, build it with your own data. And at Oracle, we provide this kind of infrastructure, you understood, so to help you to be really sovereign.
In the future, it's not just going to be one AI that wins, it's going to be many. And so think long term about how you're going to orchestrate between all these different things, some of them being sovereign AI, some of them being general purpose, and plan for that into the future with the right software.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think we covered a lot of ground across the whole stack. That was super interesting. We at Cherry actually invest a lot in energy. We've just done an investment in fusion, which is super interesting, but then also in a photonic chip company. So I guess if either of you are building pre-seed to Series A, you want to start out, come find me after. And everyone here will also be around to answer your questions. Thank you.